Welcome to the White Knight Theater. In episode 17 of The Dark One, The Provocation of the Killer, in Huang Zhiping's shack, Mu Jianyun observed that Huang Zhiping maintained the habit of keeping a private calendar. This behavior led Mu Jianyun to believe that he might still be pursuing and expecting something. On the other side, Zheng Rihua successfully restored the deleted photos from the camera and also traced the person in the photos, Sun Chunfeng, to his address. Based on the address provided by Zheng Rihua, Han Hao and Xiong Yuan launched a secret arrest operation targeting Sun Chunfeng. However, upon arriving at the scene, they found the situation different from what they had anticipated. Sun Chunfeng was tied up, with his hands cuffed and locked in a room. Just as SWAT team member Lu Song was about to unlock Sun Chunfeng's handcuffs, he was stopped by the latter's loud shouts. It turned out that the handcuffs were connected to a bomb. The nerves of everyone present, which had just relaxed, were immediately stretched to the extreme again. Xiong Yuan restrained Lu Song and squatted down to carefully examine the situation. Sure enough, two thin wires extended from the handcuffs lock and led into Sun Chunfeng's clothing. Xiong Yuan gestured to Han Hao and the others to move back, then cautiously pulled open the young man's shirt. At the end of the wires, a square plastic box was tied around the young man's waist. The young man in front of them was clearly on the verge of a breakdown. This is a bomb. As soon as someone enters the room, the bomb will activate and explode in 10 minutes, Xiong Yuan explained. Indeed, there was an electronic display on the box, with red numbers clearly showing the remaining time, less than 8 minutes. Captain Xiong organized the evacuation of the crowd. In that moment, everything was communicated through a glance. Han Hao said nothing more and swiftly led his team away. There's a bomb in the house. Evacuate immediately. Move quickly, everyone evacuate now, he shouted. Lu Song, you go too. Help with the evacuation, Xiong Yuan ordered. You're not needed here. Lu Song's eyes glistened with unshed tears. He bit his lip and, after a moment of hesitation, accepted Xiong Yuan's command and rushed outside. Meanwhile, outside the house, the sounds of hurried footsteps, shouts, and pounding on doors had already merged into a chaotic din. Sun Chunfeng's body trembled uncontrollably, his panicked gaze darting back and forth between the bomb's display and Xiong Yuan's face. At this moment, Xiong Yuan actually smiled. He patted the young man's shoulder in a comforting gesture. Don't move. I'm going to start defusing the bomb, he said. The touch of Xiong Yuan's broad and strong hand seemed to infuse Sun Chunfeng with a strange sense of calm. Sun Chunfeng stopped trembling, and the look of anticipation in his eyes became more pronounced. Xiong Yuan took out the specialized knife he always carried. Designed for the SWAT team, it was not only extremely sharp, but also equipped with multiple functional attachments. Now, he would use it to open the bomb's casing, the first step in the defusing process that could not be skipped. The screws holding the casing in place were quickly removed, and the shell began to loosen. Xiong Yuan focused his mind, held his breath, and gently lifted the plastic shell off. Just as the shell was about to separate from the bomb's core, Xiong Yuan suddenly felt a slight resistance, as if there was a hidden wire connecting the shell and the core. His heart lurched in alarm. He immediately stopped, but it seemed his reaction was already too slow. After a soft beep, the countdown on the display suddenly accelerated, the numbers rapidly ticking down. In just a few seconds, the time had nearly reached 0. Sun Chunfeng screamed in terror, his body twisting and struggling futilely. Even Xiong Yuan broke out in a cold sweat in that instant. In the face of the sudden situation, Xiong Yuan decided to take a gamble. He exerted force with his wrist and forcibly pulled the bomb shell off. Almost simultaneously, the countdown display showed 0, and the bomb's core began to expand. Xiong Yuan closed his eyes in despair, but the expected explosion did not happen. Instead, a cheerful melody began to play in his ears. When he opened his eyes in astonishment, he saw a piece of paper slowly rising from the split bomb, accompanied by the music. It was not a bomb at all, but a music box with a hidden mechanism. Xiong Yuan breathed a sigh of relief, deeply inhaling. He smelled something strange, and upon closer inspection, saw that Sun Chuanfeng's pants were soaked. He had been so scared that he had lost control of his bowels and bladder. With a helpless, wry smile, Xiong Yuan reached for the note that had emerged from the bomb. After reading its contents, he quickly ran out of the house and called over Han Hao and the others, who were still busy in the hallway. Lu Song helped Sun Chunfeng remove the handcuffs. After a while, Sun Chunfeng gradually recovered from his near-breakdown state and began to stammer out his ordeal of the past day. The night before last, I was at the internet cafe, playing all night until I came back to my place in the morning. I was so tired that I fell asleep as soon as I lay down. When I woke up, I found myself unable to move. Not only were my hands and feet tied up, but my mouth and eyes were also covered. Then, a strange voice told me that I was tied to the radiator and that there was a bomb connected to the handcuffs. If anyone tried to open the cuffs, the bomb would explode. There was also a remote control placed on the door. As soon as the door was opened, the bomb's timer would start counting down. The countdown was set for 10 minutes. After that person left, I was tied up until you guys showed up. We've been tricked. After killing Inspector Zheng, the murderer immediately came here and set this trap for us. You mean those deleted photos were also clues deliberately left by him? Isn't that clear enough? Someone questioned. The murderer had done all this, knowing that they would find this place. But why did he do it? Was it just to pass us that note? The note retrieved from the bomb was now in Han Hao's hand. He had read its contents several times and could recite it from memory. The handwriting was in a standard imitation Song typeface. The familiar-looking sentences formed a death notice. Criminal, Han Xiaoong. Crime, intentional murder. Execution date, October 23rd. Executor, Eumenides. Han Hao's hand trembled slightly as he understood what the note signified. Of course, his trembling was not out of fear, but out of uncontrollable rage. The sheer audacity of the murderer to notify the police of the victim's name and the time of the crime in such a manner was an outrageous insult and mockery. At this moment, Han Hao was like a dangerous volcano, ready to erupt at any moment. Meanwhile, somewhere else, someone was in a completely different state of mind. This person was playing with a sensor in his hand, which seemed to record certain times. 21 hours, 50 minutes to reach the scene, for minutes and 11 seconds to defuse the bomb. Not bad. Finally, it's getting interesting. At 10:40 a.m. on October 22nd, 2 hours earlier, Han Hao and Xiong Yuan had launched a strong operation targeting the Dongming community. However, they were thoroughly outwitted by their opponent. Now, they were gathered in the conference room of the Criminal Police Brigade, discussing countermeasures with other members of the Special Task Force. Zheng Rihua, who had been sent by Han Hao to rest, had just lain down when he was called back. His eyes were red and swollen, his hair disheveled, and he looked quite disheveled. Han Hao's situation report made him even more upset. As soon as Han Hao finished speaking, Zheng Rihua looked at him discontentedly. Are you sure this son, Chunfeng, has nothing to do with the case at all? We've investigated his family background, relevant experiences, social circle, and recent activities. He's just an ordinary dropout. If there's any connection between him and this case, it's that on the 18th, he happened to browse that death penalty solicitation post, and thus appeared in the photos taken by Inspector Zheng, someone explained. Zheng Rihua's own work, which he had been so proud of, turned out to be worthless. He could only swallow his frustration, and then, as if remembering something, he shook his head bitterly. I was mistaken. This murderer is not just a computer geek. He's a real master. Episode 18 of The Dark One. The game begins. Han Hao and Xiong Yuan's plan to arrest Sun Chunfeng was thrown into disarray by the situation on the ground. Sun Chunfeng's limbs were bound, and he was connected to a bomb. Thus, the arrest turned into a rescue mission. It was only at the moment of the bomb's explosion that Han Hao and Xiong Yuan realized they had been toyed with by the murderer, and that Sun Chunfeng had no connection to the case. At yesterday's meeting, Zheng Rihua had ridiculed the murderer for lacking digital skills. Now, his attitude had made a 180-degree turn. In Jian, responsible for the meeting minutes, couldn't help but show a surprised expression. But when he looked around, he found that the other people present were all nodding, as if they understood perfectly. If the murderer was a computer expert, then the issues involved were much deeper. If he had only used the irrelevant photo to set a trap, then the motive for the crime we had originally speculated no longer held up. Why did he kill Inspector Zheng Haoming? That's right. Since there was no connection between the murderer and Sun Chunfeng, his ability to set up the trap at Dongming Community was probably because he had tracked Sun Chunfeng's movements through the photos in the camera. In that case, his network tracking skills were not inferior to Zheng Rihua's. Working with these experts, there was indeed a lot to learn. Distracted by these thoughts, Yin Jian no longer had the energy to think about the questions Xiong Yuan had raised later and could only listen attentively to others' analyses. After a while, Xiong Yuan was the first to break the silence. Actually, the motive for the crime is not so puzzling. Since Inspector Zheng was investigating this case and was then killed by the murderer, the most likely reason is still that Inspector Zheng had discovered some clues, and the murderer was eager to cover up the fact that he had been discovered. But what really puzzles me is why the murderer went to such lengths with the photos and the camera. Was it just a toy with us? Not only is it puzzling, but it can also be said to be completely contradictory, Luo Fei said, raising his head after a moment of deep thought. What contradiction? Someone asked. The contradiction of two psychological states. If the murderer's purpose in committing the crime was to cover up clues, his psychological state should have been to avoid the police's attention. But the trap he set by deliberately deleting the photos clearly revealed too much to the police. These two completely opposite psychological states appearing at the same crime scene are obviously very unreasonable. That's right, Xiong Yuan agreed. There's another situation that might open everyone's minds. I just mentioned that at the crime scene in Dongming Community, the suspect made a fake bomb. When the technicians did the later detection, they found a signal transmitter on it. Ah, Captain Han, what kind of signal does this transmitter emit? Zheng Rihua asked, his attention drawn back from his messy hair. As the person who knew the situation on the spot best, he had the most say at this moment. It's not anything special. Just a simple device connected to the timer that can feed back the operation status of the timer to the signal receiver. What is that guy doing? Someone asked. Is he timing for you? Timing. Luo Fei's eyebrows furrowed. He lightly tapped his fingertips on the table, deep in thought. Han Hao's attention was drawn to him. Officer Luo, I haven't heard your opinion yet. This is not like you, Han Hao said. We have a mistake in our approach, or rather, a mistake in our attitude, Luo Fei said. What do you mean? Someone asked. What we're thinking about now is what we have discovered and what loopholes the opponent has left. But we are all wrong. We must confirm that we have not discovered anything. So far, it has all been a show. He publicly issued a death penalty solicitation post online. He killed Inspector Zheng and then deliberately left clues for the police to track. He even told us the next target and time of the crime. Now, it is not us looking for him, but he is leading us around in circles. There is no doubt that such a fact is embarrassing. Only Zheng Rihua laughed carelessly. Humph, so what should we do now? Have an internal self-criticism meeting first. Luo Fei's words were not wrong. Recognizing this point itself is valuable. The murderer who killed Inspector Zheng, his purpose is no longer just the case itself. He seems to have an arrogant game mentality and is challenging the police. I know this, but what does this mean for the investigation of the case? Someone asked. Han Hao glanced at Mu Jianyun and Luo Fei. Mu Jianyun stopped talking, and they all looked at Luo Fei, waiting for his next words. The game is correct. The murderer carefully designed a game, and he may have been preparing for it for 18 years. Now everything is ready. There's a plan, there are targets, but it is still not complete. For the game, he is still missing one thing. Without this thing, no matter how good the game is, it is not exciting enough. Saying this, Luo Fei stopped and let everyone think. But after a long time, everyone still looked at each other and did not understand. Zheng Rihua could not help at first. What is still missing? The opponent. A good game needs a good opponent. Maybe we overcomplicated the cause of Inspector Zheng's death. The murderer killed Inspector Zheng, perhaps just because his secret investigation for 18 years had no progress. So he wanted to rebuild the special task force before the game began and replace it with a truly qualified opponent. Listening to Luo Fei's words, everyone felt extremely uncomfortable. Zhang Rihua twisted his body and forced a smile, looking at Luo Fei. If we follow your idea, we are all characters that he replaced to play the game with him. Luo Fei did not answer directly, and his expression was also very bad. Following this line of thinking, we can explain the trap at Dongming Community. He was testing us, deliberately leaving clues for us to find Sun Chunfeng, and he was timing us. It sounds so absurd, ridiculous, and terrible. I don't know if our performance will satisfy him. After Luo Fei finished speaking, there was a silence in the meeting. After a long time, Xiong Yuan murmured, "It's really hard to believe. It is really hard to believe." Everyone agreed. But I have to admit that if we analyze the suspect in this way, all his behaviors are unified in psychology so far, forming a very clear target subject. Yin Jian was surprised with his mouth open. He did not know whether he should write this part into the meeting minutes as it was. I agree. Since someone wants to play such a game, we will accompany him, Han Hao said with a gloomy face. It was not clear whether he agreed with Luo Fei's analysis or was speaking to the arrogant opponent. His fist then slammed on the table fiercely, and everyone's emotions were also shocked. Subsequently, Han Hao made a resounding promise. His gaze swept over everyone, creating a united and hostile atmosphere in the meeting. Good. This is indeed an interesting game, and this game is about to start soon, right? Han Hao said. Yin Jian, show everyone that death penalty notice, Han Hao ordered. Yin Jian was already prepared. He turned on the projector, and the note left at the Dongming Community scene appeared in front of everyone. The standard imitation song typeface, the familiar content, read, death penalty notice. Criminal, Han Xiaoong. Crime, intentional murder. Execution date, October 23rd. Executor, Eumenides. Everyone understood what the note meant. Tomorrow was the time when this thrilling game would begin. Episode 19 of The Dark One, The Beautiful Convict. During the meeting, Luo Fei pointed out the ideological mistakes everyone had made since the case began and shared his own conjecture. In the eyes of the murderer, everything was just a game, and Zheng Haoming's death was merely because the murderer wanted to replace him with a more qualified opponent. Although everyone felt uneasy, Luo Fei's logical analysis was recognized by Mu Jianyun, and Han Hao was determined to fight the murderer to the end. He then showed everyone the note retrieved from the bomb. It was a death penalty notice for a convict named Han Xiaoong. All right, there's no need to explain this no further. Lin Jie, please introduce the situation of Han Xiaoong to everyone, Han Hao said. Okay, Yin Jian replied. A half-body photo of a woman appeared on the projection screen. Han Xiaoong, female, 30 years old, married but childless. Local household registration, currently residing in Villa number 72, Jinding Center, South City. She is the general manager of Duhua Import and Export Trading Company. Hey, there are many people named Han Xiaoong in this city. How can we be sure it's her? Someone asked. Because she herself also received a death penalty notice, Yin Jian explained. Look, this is the reply post under the online death penalty solicitation thread. In the third reply, someone mentioned this Han Xiaoong, and more than 20 others followed up in agreement. So, we can assume that she was chosen by netizens. Why did so many people choose her? Mu Jianyun voiced the confusion everyone had. From the photo, this woman named Han Xiaoong is exceptionally beautiful and charming. She should be popular online. Why would she be so hated? Mu Jianyun continued. Luo Fei interjected. Han Xiaoong was involved in a traffic accident half a year ago, where she ran over and killed a vegetable vendor. After the incident spread online, many people believe she had committed intentional murder, which aroused public outrage. I've heard about this case. So it was her, someone said. I heard she has a very strong background. Mu Jianyun and Xiong Yuan had heard about the case before, but Luo Fei, who was not a local and rarely used the internet, was not familiar with the details. So, In Jian gave him a brief introduction. About half a year ago, on April 5th, Han Xiaohong drove a red BMW and knocked over the roadside stall of a farmer named Xiong Guangzhong. The two got into an argument. Xiong Guangzhong demanded compensation for his losses, but Han Xiaohong ignored him, claiming he was operating illegally. After a heated quarrel, Han Xiaohong tried to drive away, but Xiong Guangzhong blocked the front of her car. In the standoff, Han Xiaohong's BMW suddenly started and accelerated towards Xiong Guangzhong. Xiong Guangzhong later died in the hospital. There were many witnesses around, and the incident quickly spread among people and online. Han Xiaohong later explained that she had intended to reverse her car to bypass Xiong Guangzhong, but accidentally shifted into the wrong gear due to her agitation, causing the tragedy. The judicial investigation accepted and believed Han Xiaohong's explanation. A month ago, she was sentenced to 3 years in prison, suspended for 2 years for traffic manslaughter. The verdict caused a lot of controversy, with widespread condemnation and criticism online. Most people believed Han Xiaohong had intended to run over Xiong Guangzhong and should have been charged with intentional murder and received a severe punishment. I also think she committed intentional murder, Mu Jianyan said. According to the descriptions of eyewitnesses at the scene, Han Xiaohong had verbally threatened Xiong Guangzhong before driving, saying something like, "If you don't get out of the way, I'll run you over." It's hard to believe that her actions were due to accidentally shifting gears. What about the principle of innocent until proven guilty? Zheng Rihua asked. Does that mean I can just drive around and hit people on the street? We're all police officers. Let's not beat around the bush, Xiong Yuan said. To put it bluntly, the lenient sentence and punishment are because Han Xiaohong has a lot of money and powerful connections. Luo Fei glanced at Zheng Rihua and felt a bit more favorably towards him. Xiong Yuan then coughed dryly and said, "Let's get back to the case. What should we do next?" Everyone's attention turned to the head of the Special Task Force, Han Hao, who had already prepared a plan. Tomorrow was the 23rd, the day the suspect had announced he would execute Han Xiaohong. Since the suspect was so brazenly challenging the police, Han Hao decided to set a trap. As the assistant, In Jian elaborated on Han Hao's plan. Generally, murders happen in secluded places with little foot traffic, but this case was different because the suspect had already revealed his murder plan to the police. He must know that the police would be guarding Han Xiaohong, making it impossible to kill her secretly. Therefore, the crime scene would likely be in a busy area with chaotic scenes and difficult-to-prevent locations. Han Xiaohong's company was located in the city center's Diyi building. Every day around 9 a.m., she would leave home, drive to the Yi building, and park her car in the ground parking lot around the building since it had no underground parking. She would then walk into the building and work until 4 p.m., after which she would go home. Her home was in the villa area of Jinding Center, which had strict management and 24-hour surveillance. The security system of the Yi building was also very tight, with access control at the entrance. Therefore, neither of these places was likely to be the crime scene. So, if the suspect really wanted to kill Han Xiaohong tomorrow, the best place to commit the crime would be the parking lot outside the building. The area was open, with many adjacent roads leading in all directions and a complex mix of people. It would be relatively easier to strike and escape. Thus, the most important task for tomorrow was to guard this parking lot. During the analysis, In Jian displayed photos of the relevant locations, which matched his description. Han Hao added, "Of course, we also need to guard against unconventional methods of committing the crime, such as poisoning, long-range shooting, stage car accidents, explosions, and so on." He looked at Captain Xiong and said, "Captain Xiong, I'll leave this to you." Han Hao glanced at Xiong Yuan, but he didn't immediately accept the mission. He frowned slightly and said, "You mean to guard Han Xiaohong around clock? If the suspect makes a move, we can catch him red-handed." "That's right. I don't believe anyone can kill under the police's watch," Han Hao replied. "But I feel uneasy about it. We should restrict Han Xiaohong's movements tomorrow and keep her indoors to ensure her safety as much as possible." "I understand what you're saying, but how long can she stay indoors? If the suspect doesn't give up tomorrow and kills Han Xiaohong another day, won't we miss the best chance to catch him? Xiong Yuan argued, "No matter what, I don't agree with using the person to be protected as bait." The two main figures in the Special Task Force had different opinions, and both seemed reasonable. Han Hao thought for a moment and came up with a solution. "Let's have a vote. Minority obeys the majority. Let's decide which plan to adopt." "Okay, let's vote," Zheng Rihua said, raising his hand first. "I agree with Captain Han. Han Xiaohong is not a good person. Why worry so much about her? Although it would be a pity if such a beautiful woman really got killed," he added with a teasing tone, glancing at Mu Jianyun. Mu Jianyun smiled faintly at Zheng Rihua. "She is indeed beautiful and enviable, but my jealousy won't affect my judgment. I support Captain Xiong. Protecting Han Xiaohong's life is the most important thing." "Scary. You really can't deceive anyone," Luo Fei commented. "Now it's 2-2. Captain Han, what's your stance?" With Han Hao's words, everyone's attention focused on Luo Fei. He made his choice. He supports Han Hao. Captain Han's plan is good. Let's make a detailed operation plan. Episode 20 of The Dark One, The Coin's Obverse. After a disagreement between Xiong Yuan and Han Hao, the team held a vote and ultimately decided to implement Han Hao's plan. The meeting dragged on until after 2 in the afternoon, and a surveillance plan for Han Xiaohong was finally established. The main force for the operation would still be the criminal police and special police elite led by Han Hao and Xiong Yuan. Luo Fei would only play a marginal role in the action, which he found unsurprising, considering this was not his jurisdiction of Longzhou City. Once the meeting was over, Han Hao and Xiong Yuan immediately began arranging the preparations for the operation. Zheng Rihua hurried back to his room to catch up on sleep. The conference room was left with only Luo Fei and Mu Jianyun. After everyone else had left, Mu Jianyun brought up the old account from the meeting. "Officer Luo, your final choice went against the principles of a police officer. A good police officer should prevent crimes from happening, but you're creating convenient conditions for the criminal's actions. Do you think the criminal can succeed under the close watch of so many police officers?" Luo Fei asked. "To be honest, I'm not particularly interested in what will happen tomorrow. I just want to know what people are thinking," Mu Jianyun replied. "Xiong Yuan and I have adhered to the professional ethics of the police, but you haven't. Han Hao is eager to catch the murderer, maybe to avenge Inspector Zheng, or perhaps driven by a desire to make a quick achievement. That's understandable. Zheng Rihua is clearly not mature enough, still working with a naive sense of justice. But what about you? Luo Fei, you are much calmer than Han Hao and not as superficial as Zheng Rihua. So why did you make the same choice as them?" "I don't know. A person can't be unaware of their own thoughts. You just don't want to face your own ideas. When you analyzed the motive for the murderer to kill Inspector Zheng today, it really startled me. That speculation was so bold. Although it was very reasonable, most people wouldn't think along those lines. Why could you do it? It's simple. Put yourself in the murderer's shoes and think from their perspective. We learned this in the basic courses at the police academy, but none of us could think of it. You did. What does this mean?" Luo Fei narrowed his eyes, waiting for her to continue. Mu Jianyun smiled again, half jokingly. "It means that you and the murderer think most alike. In a way, you two are very similar. All right, I can't refute your reasoning. So he's also the opponent you want, isn't he? You and he both are looking forward to this thrilling game." Luo Fei fell silent for a moment. Then he suddenly laughed. With his thoughts exposed by Mu Jianyun, Luo Fei's face showed a look of relief. "Have you ever heard this saying? To become an excellent criminal investigator, you first need to be an excellent criminal." That was said by Mr. Liu from the criminal investigation major at the police academy, right? I remember he also said that excellent investigators and excellent criminals share many traits: keenness, meticulousness, adventurousness, and curiosity. They're like two sides of the same coin. Peering into the other's state is always what they most want to do, but find hardest to achieve. That's right. It was Mr. Liu. He's my mentor. I'm glad you're the obverse side of the coin, the side of justice. If you chose to be a criminal, That would be truly terrifying. Terrifying? I don't think so. At least there is something more terrifying than that. What is it? A woman with a degree in psychology? Luo Fei mimicked Zheng Rihua's tone, and his smile formed two deep lines at the corners of his mouth. Mu Jianyun was taken aback, her brows furrowing in embarrassment. Why are you also playing with words? Men are really no good at all. At 16:23 in the afternoon on October 22nd, Zheng Rihua arrived at the criminal police office once again. His hair was disheveled, and his police uniform was wrinkled, making him look like he had just woken up from sleep. This is really exhausting. I won't be able to sleep soundly today. Zheng Rihua complained with a yawn, though his eyes, bloodshot as they were, sparkled with excitement. Han Hao caught his gaze and immediately sensed the change in Zheng Rihua's mood. What's up? Any new discoveries? The murderer posted the death penalty notice online. The post was made about half an hour ago, Zheng Rihua said. Han Hao quickly turned on the computer in front of him and opened the relevant forum. Sure enough, a post titled Death Penalty Notice, signed by Eumenides, was already generating a lot of clicks and discussions. The content of the post was identical to the letter the police had received. Below the main post, dozens of replies had already appeared in just half an hour. People were expressing astonishment, sarcasm, and joining in the discussion with great enthusiasm. Have you found the location where this guy posted the message? The posting time was just now. Even if he posted from an internet cafe, we can find a lot of valuable clues if we can pinpoint the exact location, Han Hao said. This guy is really arrogant. He knows we are monitoring the network, but he still posts openly. Although he set up a proxy server, our people still easily track the original IP address. This IP belongs to a collective user, not an internet cafe, but a cultural company. This is the company's registered address, Zheng Rihua said, handing a note to Han Hao. Han Hao was not interested in the IP numbers on the note. His eyes immediately focused on the address. Number 23 Ingbin Street, Haijing Building, room 901. 15 minutes later, Han Hao, Yin Jian, and Zheng Rihua had already arrived at the location. Faced with the hurried police officers, the front desk receptionist did not dare to be negligent. She quickly arranged the three men in a conference room and immediately called over the company's person in charge and the network administrator. Preliminary inquiries confirmed that since the company started work at 2 in the afternoon, no outsiders had entered the company and none of the employees had left. Han Hao immediately ordered Yin Jian to guard the entrance. As long as no one left the building, the poster would have no chance of escaping. Zheng Rihua handed the note to the network administrator. Check which computer corresponds to this address, he said. I have to look it up to know, the network administrator replied nervously. He was a young man in his early 20s with an oily side-parted hairstyle. It was probably his first time dealing with the police, and he spoke hesitantly. The plump company person in charge next to the young man glared at him. You don't know this? How can you do your job like this? Mr. Liu, our company has a dynamic IP address distribution. This IP is definitely from inside the company, but I need to check which machine it is, the young man said, trying to explain. I've emphasized again and again that work must be done meticulously. You young people just can't do it. In my day, it was different, Mr. Liu said, swallowing his saliva with a sense of dissatisfaction. Then he turned to Han Hao and Zheng Rihua with a smile. What's going on, comrades? Did someone log into a pornographic website? Oh, no need to check. It must be that bad boy Kong Shan. I'll fire him tomorrow, Mr. Liu said. Han, how do I want to beat around the bush? How many employees do you have in your company? 12, including me. We are a small company, just starting out, Mr. Liu replied, handing over his business card. Here's my card. Please give me some guidance. Han, how did I want to waste any more words with Mr. Liu? He politely took the card and began to observe the surroundings, trying to find more breakthroughs.